Hello and welcome back to Granted Gardens. Today we're adding something fun to Granted Gardens. So Tyler and I had on our goal list to do some homework and start composting. We have a compost pile in the backwoods. Really, it's just kind of been a catch-all for a lot of things. We have a lot of work to do on that. But something that we thought would be really fun to start doing, and something that seemed pretty simple, was to use worms for compost. So Tyler put together a pretty easy and inexpensive worm composter, which I'll show you here in a second. And we ordered some worms from Uncle Jim's Worm Farm, and they came in today. So I'm gonna show you guys what our setup looks like, and we're gonna get these worms out of this bag and get them to work. So last year we had done some homework and we had found a YouTube video on how you can make a worm composting bin out of 5-gallon buckets. Buckets are something that we have plenty of around the house, so we figured we'd go ahead and we'd make it and see if we could give it a shot. So just a quick review of what we've got. We've modified the original YouTube video that we watched a little bit, but I'll show you what we have and then I'll put the link to the YouTube video down below. I believe it was from Green Shorts DIY. So we actually have 3 5-gallon buckets here and a lid. The lid, we just went ahead, Tyler drilled some holes in at the top here, and then we put a mesh underneath, and then we just glued the mesh around the holes so that the worms can't get out. The second bucket that we have here, again, a 5-gallon bucket, empty 5-gallon bucket. We did something similar here where we drilled some holes in the bottom, 6 holes in the bottom, and then we put the mesh in at the bottom and we glued around the holes again so that the worms can't fall through. So this is going to be the bucket that we'll go ahead, we'll put our worms in, we'll put our newspaper in, and we'll put our food scraps in. So after the worms do their thing and it falls through the holes in the bottom, we've got this second bucket here, that, again, empty bucket. This one we just drilled holes in the side of, just a little bit up from the bottom, just along the sides. That way any of the liquid can fall through to the bottom bucket, but any of the solids will stay in this bucket here. So essentially when worms do their business, there will be, from the liquid, there will be a liquid compost that'll fall away the bottom. Then any worm waste to the solid stuff will stay here in the top. There's 2 ways that you can use that. So this bucket here will catch the solid waste. Anything that's solid waste you can go ahead and take out and you can mix into your garden beds, into your dirt you have in your garden beds. And then the liquid waste will be caught in this third 5-gallon bucket here. There's no holes in this one, so this will hold all the liquid waste. Now the liquid waste, you can just do 1 part liquid waste, liquid fertilizer, and 1 part water, and you can shake it up and you can water all of your plants and flowers with that. So now that you've seen the setup, we're gonna get the worms out and move them into their new home. Alright, so some things that you're going to need to do this are kitchen scraps. We've just got some vegetables here that didn't quite make it to use before they found the back of the refrigerator. You need some newspaper, and then of course you need your worms. Since this is our first time really trying this out, I just went with the 100 worm count. You can get them in much greater quantities, but I decided to just do the 100 because we're really just experimenting. And plus the worms will multiply. They'll lay eggs and they'll make more worms. So I'm just going to go ahead and work on starting with the instructions that came with our worms. And it says to start out by adding your worms to 1/2 cup of water. So for the sake of being able to see what we're doing, I'm just going to go ahead and use this little tray here. I've got half a cup of water. I'm going to go ahead and pour in a little bit. Then we're going to take our worms And we're going to pour them in. Gently. And then I'll go ahead and add the rest of the water. And we'll let them sit for, we'll give them 15 minutes since they're brand new to this. But I'd heard a lot of people with concern about how small the worms were or that they weren't moving much when they got them. These guys look healthy as all get out. They look happy to be exploring, but they do typically double their weight once they get moved into their new home. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead while they're soaking in their water and start prepping our bin. So first what you'll need to do is you just need to cut your newspaper up into strips. I'm gonna go ahead and just rip mine. I'm gonna do strips about an inch or so thick. Doesn't have to be pretty. And then once I've cut my newspaper into strips, I'm gonna go ahead and soak them in some water. Once they're good and soaked, we're going to take them out of the water and we're going to start lining the bottom of our first bucket. This is going to be the bucket that we are going to put the worms directly in. So I'm going to continue this process until the bottom of the bucket is entirely lined. Now that the bottom of our bucket is totally lined, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our worms. After you get your worms in, you want to go ahead and add your food scraps. Now every single time that you add food scraps to your worm composter, you want to make sure that you add a layer of bedding of sorts. So I'm going to go ahead and actually add some more newspaper. I'm going to just put in some dry newspaper and then sprinkle it with water instead of entirely saturating it. Now every single time that you add food scraps to your worm composter, you want to make sure that you add a layer of bedding of sorts. So I'm going to go ahead and actually add some more newspaper. I'm going to just put in some dry newspaper and then sprinkle it with water instead of entirely saturating it. And then I'm just going to sprinkle by hand some water. Once you've reached the step where you put the last layer of bedding on top, you can go ahead and secure your lid and you're all set. You can go ahead and add food scraps to this as you go, and then just keep an eye out for any of the solid waste or the liquid fertilizer and go ahead and use it as your worms put the work in. So I thought that was pretty simple. It was extremely inexpensive. We had the buckets, we had the mesh, we had the glue. So all we had to do really was buy the worms. But yeah, if you guys have any kind of worm compost, I'm curious to see what they look like. Please feel free to share below. Thanks so much for watching. I look forward to sharing more with you soon.